Welcome. Thank you for showing up and participating in the democratic process. This is a nonpartisan event. It's hosted by the West Kootenay Climate Hub, doctors and nurses for Planetary Health, Kootenay-Boundary region, the West Kootenay chapter of the Council of Canadians, and we'd also like to thank Nelson United Church for hosting us in this beautiful space. My name's Kim Bader, and I'll act as the moderator for tonight's event. It'll be my job to keep the process moving, to guide everyone so that it's a fair process for each candidate. And tonight, you'll have a chance to listen, observe, and get to understand the candidates' ideas and positions as you consider who to vote for. And in a reciprocal way, the candidates will have a chance to listen to you through questions to better understand what constituents want. So in a minute, I'll introduce the candidates and explain the process for the evening. But first, we'll start with a land acknowledgement that the United Church uses. For thousands of years, First Nations people have walked on this land. Their relationship with the land is at the center of their lives and spirituality. We acknowledge that the land on which Nelson United Church gathers is the traditional territories of the Sinixt and Ktunaxa peoples and is home to many diverse Indigenous persons, including the Métis. We acknowledge the injustices that Indigenous people have faced and continue to face today, and we commit to reconciliation together as children of the Creator. So that's from the United Church. And now to our candidates. We have, in order, Corinne, Brittny, and Nicole. And Kelly Vandenberghe was invited and replied to us and was unable to make it tonight. So this process tonight has 4 sections. We will have opening statements from the candidates where they each have 3 minutes to talk to us about what's important to them. We want to be tight on time, so we have a timekeeper. And what will happen is when there's 15 seconds left, they will hold up. Do you want to do that? Hold up the card. 15 seconds. And then when the 3 minutes is up, the time's up card will come up. And if a candidate doesn't stop, then I will interrupt the candidate and I will ask Galen, who is handling the sound tonight, to please turn off the mic. So that's section 1 is opening statements. Section 2 is that the organizing group for tonight's event have developed 4 questions. Those have been sent to the candidates in advance, and each candidate will have a chance to respond to each question. They may pass if they choose to. And we also have something, Brittny, can you hold up? We have rebuttal cards. So each candidate will have 2 rebuttal cards. So after the questions have been answered by each candidate, one of the candidates can rebut something that one of the candidates has said, and they have 1 minute for that. And they have 2 total. You don't have to use both of them, but you may use both of them throughout the evening. So that's the second section, is the questions from the organizers. The third section is questions from the audience. You've submitted questions, and there's a group right now behind in the side room here who are going through the questions and grouping them, because we will only have time for 6 or 7 questions, and so we want to make sure we get as many people's sentiments into the question as possible. So there might be 2 or 3 questions that are completely related to something around forestry, and so they'll put those together into 1 question. And rebuttals are possible here also. And then the last section is that Each candidate will have 1 minute for a closing statement. And just as a piece of information, the event is being recorded. There will be potentially clips used on some Kootenay Co-op radio shows and perhaps for other events. I've also want to share with you some guidelines for learning and understanding, because perhaps that's what an election can be about. So we ask for your cooperation, all of us, including myself, in following these guidelines. So one is respect for the presenters, the candidates. They have put themselves on the line. We may disagree with ideas that they have, but they still deserve respect. Yeah. And respect for others bringing different backgrounds and perspectives, and that might come out in the question section. And one of the things we would aim for here is intellectual humility. My partner sometimes reminds me of this when I'm proselytizing about something as I'm listening to the radio or reading an article that I think is brilliant. So that intellectual humility is important, as it helps us wind our way to find some version of the truth. Another thing that's really important is openness to learning and dialogue. So tonight, this is a formal process. For the rest of the election time, there'll be many other opportunities to engage with friends and neighbors and candidates. And can I have an attitude of learning? I might think I know what a certain person or a certain party stands for, but could I please, can I possibly be curious and learn something? And to focus on the issues at hand. And tonight we have specific issues that are the focus of this forum. Other forums have different focuses. So we're going to stick to the focus of what the purpose of this forum is. And this isn't the only opportunity to engage with candidates and learn more. You can contact them directly, you can visit their websites, go to other public forums and events. Take the time between now and October 19th to really figure out where people are at. And this forum won't cover some topics like affordable housing, etc., but there are other forums where that can be a focus. A few housekeeping items just before we get started. Fire exits, out or out. There's washrooms in this direction over here. And there will be materials for the candidates available as you leave the building. So if you go out those back doors, there's a table there where there will be candidate information. I think we should get started and hear something from the candidates. Yeah? So I met with the candidates in advance of starting here to talk about, here's how it's going to operate. Do you have any questions? And my job is to make sure things are fair and that things run smoothly. And one of those is to make sure that each candidate gets a chance to put their opinions forward, and that we don't have the same person being first all the time or the same person being last all the time. So there's going to be a rotation throughout the evening, so we get to hear different voices. And for the opening statements, our order is Corinne, then Brittny, and then Nicole. And again, you have 3 minutes. There's a 15-second warning. There's the stop red paddle, and then mic's turned off if need be. So are you ready? Their timer. Oh, you may start, Corinne, when you're ready.
I will be the tester. Sounds okay?
Yes.
I'm Corinne Mori, the independent candidate for this election in this riding. I want to sincerely thank you for being here tonight. I think we're in a very pivotal time, and when we come together collectively, there is some kind of energy force that builds optimism, it builds ideas, it builds plans, and so All of you are contributing to that, and so I'm very appreciative of your presence here. I've lived in the Kootenays 50 years. A majority of my experience has been in small business, construction, building, and a healthcare professional as a registered nurse. And these skills I can bring to the table in that I have a lot of capabilities to be able to assess a situation quickly. I can determine if interventions need to happen, how quickly those interventions need to happen, and if the results of what we're doing is actually producing what we're hoping it would produce. So because I have that skill set, I have been able to utilize that in building homes and running like general contracting the projects. I'm very good at watching how money is used, where it disappears, how it can be better managed. I can tell if something is about to fail. And when I look over what we're experiencing in this province right now in terms of the transfer of our wealth to the government, the increased bureaucracy, the difficulties that we are having experiencing the standard of life that we used to have, I am seeing that we are in a place that we could be very quickly having a multi-system failure. So when you see that, you can be one of those people who steps back and just doesn't respond, or you can be one of those people who gets activated, empowered, moves into position, and does their best to understand what all the evidence is in order to make some kind of plan that will keep your person alive. And that's why I have stepped into this role. I have been monitoring things at the regional district level for a year and a half, looking at how the finances are run, how things are managed, the overreach of provincial authority over what our local communities want, and I'm concerned about some of the directions that are moving forward. So as a result, I am here. I am here without a political party because I feel the only way that people can really be represented is by a representative, not by somebody who has to do what their party tells them to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinne. Next up, we have Brittny. Timer, you ready? Here we go.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Brittny Anderson. I am running for re-election with the BC NDP, and it has been an absolute honor to serve as your representative for these last 4 years. I would like to thank the organizers, and it's great to see the collaboration of so many different organizations that came together to make this happen. And also to the media, who provide a critical, have a critical role to play in our democracy. It was the first time I was on this stage, I was a lamb, and I was upset because we were in the nativity play, and I really wanted to be an angel, but I wasn't old enough yet. I love this region. It takes a community it takes a village to raise a child, and this community raised me. And so I will fight every day for the people of the Kootenays. BC NDP governments have delivered the Agricultural Land Reserve, the Columbian Basin Trust. We have kept Jumbo wild, and we took the Youth Climate Corps, I can see Ben Simone right up there, from the seedling of an idea into something where young people are taking climate action across the province. And that was what I was able to deliver as an MLA, and that was recommitted to by David Eby and the BC NDP in our government with our platform launch today. And that was all of us that made that happen from the Kootenays, taking climate action across the province. So I want to thank all of you who have been supportive of that process. We also have another local example. The Argenta, I knew I was going to get the name wrong. Okay, it was calling themselves the Argenta Brigade, but it has another name as well. It's the Argenta Safety and Preparedness Society. Now, they took time over 20 years to get trained, to get certified, to map their water systems. And they knew it wasn't if, but when a wildfire was going to strike, and they wanted to be prepared for their communities. And so this summer, when wildfires threatened their home, and they had to evacuate on short order, people that were trained, certified, and prepared and had equipment were able to stay behind and work directly with the BC Wildfire Service behind the evacuation lines because of that preparedness. When Louis Bachner put out that article, I immediately sent it to the Premier's office, to Minister Bowen Ma, and to several of my other colleagues and staff members, and we are going to be using the Argenta model across the province, because Kootenay people know how to be prepared, and we know how to protect our communities, and we know how to take climate action. And as your MLA, I will continue to deliver for you, for the people in this room, for the people in this community, for the people in our region, but also for the people in our province. I've been the Premier's special advisor on youth. I see some young people in the audience here today. It is critically important that we have young people that are interested and engaged in our society. And it's actions like the Youth Climate Corps that are getting people engaged now and are taking climate action. And I could not be more proud of being able to have that role and serving the youth of the province. I got to work with young people from across the province with the Stronger BC Young Leaders Council, and because of their work, they influenced government policy, and that was because of an NDP government. So I ask for your support on or before October 19th. Please vote for me, Brittny Anderson, and the BC NDP. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Brittny, and Nicole will close out this section with her 3-minute talk.
It's a little short for me. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. This is an important debate, I think, in this election. I'm here to offer you a new strategy. There is fear-mongering going on. There is a strategy to try to convince you that if you vote for what you want, you're going to get something super scary. Well, what I'm really scared of, and what I think many of us are scared of, is that if we go to a two-party system in this province, we're not going to look much better than those south of the border. And we as BC Greens are experienced at holding government accountable. And so I proudly stand here, Nicole Charlwood for the BC Greens. I want to be your MLA, and I have a really good chance of winning in this riding, one of the best in the province. And so if you believe that no one party should have 100% of the power, then you need to elect more Greens to the legislature in BC. I remind you, I have one of the best chances in the province to do it. And I think when we're talking about climate, I do not deny that our MLA has been working very hard. Yeah. But you do work within a party that doesn't allow full freedom. So I kind of love that I get to be a bit like Corinne, and I get to be a bit like Brittny. I get an independent vote in the legislature. I get to stand every day in the legislature if need be, if we want to. An independent can only get up every 2 weeks. So there is a power in being a BC Green, and I'm really honored that I was selected to run again for a second time because we came very close last time. And that's part of the fire that motivated me to stand up here with you again. When it comes to climate action, I've proudly stood with watershed protectors, land protectors, forest protectors in our riding for over a decade. I've helped secure funding and a new watershed security fund that exists. Our community stood together with other watershed protectors around the province, and we advocated for a fund that now even hunters are looking to protect land. So I've helped to protect land and water. I'm really proud to stand here with the BC Greens, and I really hope you consider this historic, potentially historic election in this riding and vote for me. Nicole, Charlwood, BC Greens. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicole. So that ends the first section, the opening statements, and now we're going to move into questions from the organizing group, and I have those ready, and Becky's telling me what order we're going in. Brittny's first. Who's second? Brittny. Okay. So, Brittny, the first question here is, human-caused climate change, as well as forest practices like clear-cutting and monocultures, are making forest fires and floods much more devastating. Overharvesting, tree diseases due to climate change, and log exports have resulted in dozens of mill closures. What is your plan to protect old growth, primary forests, and create a sustainable, permanent forest industry? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, so forestry is incredibly important for all of us. I mean, we literally live in a forest. We're surrounded by a forest. It impacts our drinking water. It's our flora and fauna. It's where we recreate. It is deeply a part of who we are as rural people. When I was on Nelson City Council and they were first looking at going across the province to determine how we should protect old growth and what the values were of British Columbians, I noticed that Nelson wasn't on the list. Cranbrook was, but I didn't think Cranbrook was like a great representation potentially of our values in the West Kootenays. So I called them up and I asked them to join us. They did meet Nelson City Council. They were supposed to fly in, but Councilgar happened and we did meet them online. And because of that work and that advocacy, when I was elected as MLA, John Horgan put me on the cabinet committee on old growth. And I worked very hard to have the voice of my constituents and young people represented at that table. We have deferred old growth. We are working with First Nations. Has this process been perfect? No. However, our platform came out today, and I'm really grateful that there's a few key things that are going to help us advance it. First of all, there was a recommitment to all of the recommendations in the Old Growth Strategic Report, so that is critically important. Second of all, we're going to be doing a review of the BC timber sales, the entire process. We're going to be doubling community forests, and we're going to be reinvesting in small local mills and decreasing raw log exports. I'm deeply committed to a forestry industry we're all proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittny.
Hi, so to protect old growth and primary forests, again, I will echo what Brittny said. We need to follow the recommendations of the Old Growth Review Panel, and there is discussion of biodiversity and ecosystem health law that includes their recommendations. So there are a lot of recommendations that have been floating around for a long time, and I'm disappointed to see the BC NDP government choosing not to protect Duncan River old growth in our riding. This is really vital for us to protect. So that was a good example of why we need to remove old growth from the Ministry of Forest Control. They have lost their chance. So I would like to see that removed. we continue to talk and log. We're seeing dozens of trucks still going by, some of them with very large trees on them. So yes, we don't want to be shipping all our trees out of the country like all the other resources and funding that we are pumping out of this province for international, multinational interests. I think we need to look at forestry reform in a big way. Our MLA stood on stage with me 4 years ago and promised forestry reform. We have not seen it, and I'm here to offer you a choice to vote for that reform. Thank you.
I would say government has had decades to implement some improvements. There's been several reports and instructions given that would give a good plan, and unfortunately, none of these have actually been implemented. It's interesting because I was just looking at World Resources Institute, an article came out June of this year, that actually identifies forest fires in Canada as being the biggest contribution to carbon emissions. And the amount that we released in the 2023 fires was equivalent to being number 4 in hazards released into the atmosphere behind US, China, and India. But because forest fires aren't really determined to be human-caused, they're not really looked at as being a contribution. So it comes back down to that if we want to reduce carbon emissions and we want to have an effective, efficient generating economy, it has to include forest management, which right now we're having a big issue with too much dead fuel in our forests. You just have to look at the top of this mountain to understand that we are in a death zone if a fire came over that ridge. What we do need to focus on is I have been in contact with local expertise, ecologists, fire service, forest service, the lumber, the timber sector. We have highly qualified people in this region who say to me that they are never allowed a seat at the table to help come up with the decisions that would benefit this community. What I would plan to do is, what's going on at provincial level obviously doesn't work. But we could create a template here where we take the expertise that knows what to do on how to manage our forests here, on how to use lumber and timber as a sustainable economy, and we start making our region a template for how the rest of the province could actually produce solutions.
Thanks, Corinne. Okay, we have question number 2, and what's the order for this, Becky?
Nicole, Corinne,
Okay, Nicole, Corinne, Brittny, and question number 2 is, fossil fuels are the major growing source of climate emissions, but our government is allowing, even subsidizing, big increases in gas production, which increases pollution. At the same time, the government has promised to bring emissions down to meet climate targets. Isn't it like having a public program to help people quit smoking and then offering free cigarettes? What is your position on expanding LNG and fracking in the province? Nicole, 2 minutes.
Yes is the simple answer. It is. If we want a climate-safe future, we need to stop investing in gas and oil. We have been committing, and our current government has been committing over $1 billion annually to oil and gas infrastructure, and that needs to stop. That is our clear position. As Green MLAs, we will stand clearly against any further expansion. I also really like our policy around removing greenwashing and or fossil fuel advertising. I think that would go a long way in helping curb the fear that we have that we're reliant on fossil fuels. We are not. We're only using about 10% of what we're pulling out of the ground while we destroy water, while we destroy arable land in the Peace. We have really committed a crime against our future by these investments, and when we're talking about carbon pricing, I know there are people who think that that's a waste of time. We are the only party standing here saying carbon pricing works. I support local governments who just voted unanimously in favor of keeping carbon pricing and returning what the profits from that to local communities to build climate resilience. This, we think, is vital. So on top of that, we want to see windfall profit taxes. So oil and gas, they're taking our money, they're taking our resources, most of it out of the province. If they're making a buck, we should be seeing benefits from that. And if we fairly tax the large polluters, we see huge rebates in existing climate pricing. So again, BC Greens standing unequivocally for climate action. We have never strayed. We haven't thrown any pricing under the bus. And I hope you will consider that when you vote coming up October 19th. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
As a nurse, if you just focus on one presentation that a patient comes in with, sometimes you can miss the big picture. You can treat one thing and then still cause death. When it comes to how we can continue to sustain how we use energy, there has to be a responsible implementation of how we do that. I can understand that sometimes there's a reaction that we need to act now and implement things, but if it's not done, thought out well, if it's not done responsibly, we just create more problems down the road. And given that most of us already know last year we only produced 80% of the electricity that we required, we're having to purchase electricity from Alberta and the US, which is from fossil fuel generated sources. We are not in a place where we are independent, and forcing people into not having other choices, we already have issues where the public has said that they have entered energy poverty. They cannot afford their energy even when they're using cheaper gas sources. If we continue with carbon tax, farmers and business are already stating they are on the brink of not being able to keep doing business. There comes a point where sometimes you just have to go, yeah, we have a plan, but until we have things actually implemented and in place, we can't get rid of the thing that's keeping us alive. I'm sure most of you noticed, living in Canada, we all experience winter. And if you're cold, you will die. So there are consequences to not dealing with things in a responsible way. So I'm all for it. Let's find the energy sources that best help us, but let's do it in a way that we're not going to be creating more problems down the line.
We have a lot to pack in 2 minutes. So the BCNDP has removed the largest subsidies from oil and gas producers. We've also cut methane emissions by 45%, and we are on track to cut that by 75% by 2030. We've also reduced our provincial GHG emissions by 5% over 2014 levels, and that's as our population has been growing. A BCNDP government and me personally are deeply committed to climate action. We are committed to carbon pricing. However, if the federal government decides that they are going to change their carbon pricing model, we are going to continue to ensure that the largest producers pay for their emissions, and we're going to be continuing to put that money back in the pockets of people and in programs. We recently announced that we are going to be bulk buying heat pumps. This is a model that they use in the European Union, so we're going to be subsidizing heat pumps to go into people's homes. And right now, you can get large subsidies for energy retrofits on your homes. I was speaking with someone who's actually here tonight, and they were just telling me how they had got funding for the provincial government to put a lot of insulation in their home, and that's reducing the GHG emissions and also their costs to them on their Fortis gas bill. We have just announced that we are going to have free transportation for seniors on public transit during non-peak hours. My comment to caucus was, well, if you're going from Argenta, non-peak hours might not really work because there's only one bus a day, or in Selmo there's two. So we're going to have to think about how that's going to apply to rural areas. But perhaps the bus that's traveling to Selkirk College, that might be considered a peak bus. We are also going to be implementing an inter-community bus, essentially replacing Greyhound. They've had great success in the north. And there is a lot more that we are going to continue to do to take climate action across British Columbia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I do a rebuttal?
Yeah, after. Yeah. So you want to use a rebuttal card, but we'll do the rebuttals after all the questions. So just refer back to what you wanted to rebut.
I forget.
Write it down. Get my pen.
Yeah. We're going to move to a third question. And Becky, what's the order on this one? Okay. And so the third question is, more fossil fuels are burned in transportation than any other sector in BC. The current BC plan calls for a 25% reduction in light vehicle travel by 2030. Most BC families spend $10,000 a year or more on vehicle use. What is your plan for an affordable alternative? What are your thoughts on greatly increasing funding to expand public transit to connect us across the province? 2 minutes.
So I've been in RDCK meetings for the last year and a half, watching how our local taxation is managing the public transit system, which is under the jurisdiction of the local government. Now, what we have is we have funds. What we don't have is somehow the ability to actually enact a plan. Now, what I've noticed is that there seems to be funding set aside for electric vehicles for staff to use from Monday to Friday, 8 to 4. And there's lots of talk about the need of public transit. And there is never any routes that are expanded, and there is never any action about introducing the solution to what we all know is the solution. We need more public transit in this region. What we don't have is somebody who's making sure that it's going to happen. So we're in this inertia of lots of people talking about what we need to do. There's meetings after meetings after meetings. But what we're lacking is people who actually get activated and ensure that you have what it is that you're paying for. So we know the solution is increased public transit. We're seeing the money is actually being diverted. The city of Nelson took over the contract for this public transit system. And one of the first things they did was they took between 10 and 12 perfectly good vehicles down to the salvage, and they were crushed. And a whole new fleet had to be bought. Is that how you want your money used? So it isn't necessarily that we need to get more money out of you. We need to manage the resources we have. We know what the solutions are. What we don't have is anybody who's actually implementing them. Oh, and I will make sure that they do.
So because I covered a few of those points with the last question, I just want to talk quickly about some of the work that I've done as Rural Caucus. So what Rural Caucus is are the BC NDP MLAs that represent rural communities. We meet on a weekly basis to work and advocate on the challenges that we collectively have, to use our collective voice to have more power for our rural residents and have a stronger rural voice. And so we're working on collective action. I've been the co-chair for the last 2 years, and if you'll notice, one of the 3 guiding principles is it talks about basically a rural lens on all government decision making, and that's one of the things that we have specifically been working on. Another one was healthcare, transportation, and transportation for healthcare, because that impacts all of us. We just announced that we are going to be providing free, so we will provide so if you need to travel to Kelowna or Vancouver for treatment or surgery to see a medical professional, we will pay for your mileage or your airfare up front. So that's one way that we're making transportation more accessible for people in rural areas. We are expanding transit. Unfortunately, some of the details that Mori provided are factually incorrect, but as a democracy, it's important that all voices, are heard, and this is part of this platform. Again, we have free transit for young people under 12. We have there'll be free transit for seniors. We are expanding bus routes in the RDCK, and that's a partnership between the provincial government and local governments. We have increased EV infrastructure across the province, and we will continue to support other modes of travel. When I was on council, I spearheaded our active transportation plan, and I will continue to advocate for diverse forms of transportation across this region and the province. Thank you.
Hi, yes. So a plan for an alternative to cars. I don't have a car, and I definitely don't have access to good bus routes. So this is something I'm living right now, and with young people in my life, we do need alternatives to cars. When you start adding up all the people who can't afford a car, $10,000 a year on average, we've got people with disabilities, we've got seniors, we've got youth traveling to school, we've got people traveling to work. And actually, when there is a good, frequent, fast, and free bus service available to us, we are happier, we can relax a bit more, we can get where we need to go, we can connect with other communities. So BC Greens would start with a really skookum bus coach system throughout the whole province. We need to essentially replace what we lost with Greyhound, right? But we'd like it to be a good quality, and we're not worried about who you are, or we're going to keep it simple, free for everybody. And so that's the sort of the short term, what we would do right away. Long term, as Brittny talked about, there is the opportunity for a diverse range of mobility options. And so active transit is important. We want to see long-term plan to reintroduce train for people. I would say add in train for food from Creston to make sure that gets around the riding. And we're also talking about ferries. So we know we are lucky in the interior, and folks on the coast, we have access to ferries. Ours are free. We would like it to stay that way, keep communities connected. We also talked about how much, you're talking about funding. Yes, we would absolutely increase funding for transit. Currently, our car infrastructure is fully covered. Transit, about 40%, so we would like maybe even a little less than that now. We would like to see 4 times the investment, or match the investment we are putting into car travel into all the other modes we've just talked about. Thank you.
All right, this is the last question from the organizing committee, and what's our order here, Becky? Okay. And question number 4 is, will you support subsidies to make installing home heating with heat pumps much cheaper or even free for BC homes? Do you support the current phased-in zero carbon step code to stop installing fossil gas lines to new homes?
Well, Kim, I am so glad that you asked. Yes, our government has been subsidizing people to be able to retrofit their homes and install heat pumps. We also are providing them with supports to add insulation to their homes, to change out old windows in their homes. And this is, the doing these things, it can make a huge difference on your energy bill. It can also mean that, it's less drafty, you're warmer, it's more comfortable. We also have provisions so that if you're a renter, you can work with your landlord, and also so you're able to benefit from those as well. Because before it was only people in their own homes, and we've extended that so renters are able to also get that benefit. In terms of the question about not allowing Fortis to install gas lines, that hasn't been something that our party has made a commitment around. I would say that potentially in some regions that might be a challenge when we're looking on a provincial scale. Certainly, I was very supportive of the energy step code when I was on council, and I'm looking at Jesse Woodward right now. We were on council together, and we were fighting to work to make sure that we were as aggressive as possible with the step code. But when we toured one of the buildings, one of the things that I had noticed right away was all of the embodied carbon that was going into those buildings. And so we had that discussion around the council table. And then once I had left, they started pursuing that as well as to how not only to make the building use less electricity, but also the embodied carbon, all of the energy that it takes to, with the different building materials. We've been investing in mass timber with local companies like Kolesnikov, and so making sure that our buildings are not only energy efficient, but also that their carbon footprint in construction as low as possible is something that we've been working on as a party. Thank you.
Yes, we as the Green Party are absolutely behind a lot of what we've just heard in terms of making heat pumps available. It's an effective technology. One of the concerns I have locally is the access to folks who can maintain, install. So that is one of the gaps, I would say, in our riding. The technology is there, and the benefits that a heat pump, for example, bring to the air quality of your home and your energy efficiency, for sure, it's cooling and it's heating. There are lots of reasons this technology should be making its way into our homes. And if we are simultaneously saying we don't want any new builds to have gas pumped to them, but we're offering free heat pumps, I think that is going to help propel more folks into reducing their emissions and also being more comfortable. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. You save money in the long run, and if government can help give you that nudge, that's the role of government. We're happy to help play that. Other than that, I just want to remind everybody, when we're talking climate policy, we're also talking about equity for many folks who can't afford to have clean air in their homes or do the retrofits. So I'm really grateful to city staff that I see here who have worked with many people one at a time, and that's how it takes, one at a time. But if we keep working at it, we'll get it done. So thanks to all of you who are in the trades and helping to make that happen.
I'm a little bit concerned that this terminology, free, and the government can provide, gives us this image that there's just this ATM machine that we go to pull money out of. I don't know if you're aware, but the Green Party is saying that they're going to have to double your property taxes to pay for this. This is not, it's on your,
hang on.
It's on your platform policy. Yep. Things are not free. And if we are going to look at these kinds of expenses, I have a board report here from the regional district in March of this year, where the conclusions that were stated by their senior energy efficiency staff. The cost to change a heating system is just not financially possible for homeowners. We actually don't have enough contractors to install these systems, and we don't have enough supply that could meet the demand. As well, the Clean BC rebates are actually not adequate. When RDCK staff were asked from the public, then how do we actually get solutions through this plan? RDCK in this report state that they didn't have adequate information to give the public. Are we being given enough information to make informed choices about decisions that are going to roll out, that are going to have significant financial impacts, that are causing us to reduce our access to energy sources in an irresponsible manner? And we're being told things that actually we're not seeing justifiable, credible data that is coming from the people who this is their full-time job, have been at it for 6 years, implementing plans, and then when asked for evidence to show that we've actually made improvements in these areas, could not produce it. And we have these meetings on an RDCK Observer YouTube channel. We recorded these to make sure that the public had access to this information. We are not getting all the facts, and we need to do our due diligence to ensure that we are not making decisions that are going to increase problems down the road for us. I'm on it.
Thank you, Corinne. So just before we move to audience questions, each of you has the option of a 1-minute rebuttal. So Corinne, you had indicated that you wanted to do that earlier, so now is the time you could do that if you choose to. And each candidate has that option.
May I ask a question?
You may, yes.
So my question is do we just get a rebuttal for this portion, or do we
You-
potentially use it later?
You can use it later. You have two total, and you can use them now or in the next section.
Excellent.
So, Corinne, would you like to use a rebuttal right now?
In the question that you said earlier, where you gave an example about smoking, would you mind repeating that?
Fossil fuels are the major growing source of emissions, but our government's allowing, even subsidizing big increases in gas production, which increases pollution. At the same time, the government has promised to bring emissions down to meet climate targets. Isn't it like having a public program to help people quit smoking and then offering them free cigarettes? That's the question.
So I like that analogy because right now, I wanted to introduce one more thought here.
Yeah, I'm just going to interrupt for 1 second. There's 1 minute on the rebuttal, just so you're clear. Yeah, go.
Introducing things that create a bigger problem. So I'm not sure if you're aware, because some of these things never come up in public meetings, but the Green Platform now has decided to increase safe supply drugs into our province, increasing the amount of drugs and the kinds of drugs to include fentanyl and benzodiazepines, while they want to reduce the need for a prescription. If we're already having an issue with overdose deaths that have increased substantially, just like your example here, why would you give free cigarettes? We are giving free drugs that cause death, and we're going to be flooding our province with it. So if you don't think that there's some kind of after effect that will impact our societies with that, I'm not doing a good enough job in explaining the repercussions.
Okay. Would anybody else care to use a rebuttal card at this moment? You okay? Nicole? Not right now? Okay. So we're going to move to the audience question section. And again, you will have 2 minutes to respond to these questions. You can respond to each question. You can choose to pass. It's up to you. And Judy, where's Judy here? Judy has questions here, so.
Okay. We did the best to find questions that represent all of the questions that we got, and we had to just select a few. Okay, first one. How will you address the growing polarization and divide around big topics in our communities?
Okay. Okay, Nicole, Corinne, Brittny. Yeah, stay here.
How will I address the polarization in our community?
How will you address the growing polarization and divide around big topics in our community?
Thank you.
1 minute.
No doubt.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes. Whew, all the time in the world now. So no doubt our social fabric is coming apart. And no doubt fear and division is being sown. Just look south of the border, and I've been door knocking for 1.5 years, and the number of times I hear at the door, so Trump, oh my God, right? We are worried that we are moving to a two-party situation in our legislature too. We're this far, and the role of BC Greens is to break that divide. When we are in the legislature as a strong third party, we depolarize, we create more debate. No one party gets to unilaterally decide what to do. They are forced to debate with us and come up with good long-term strategies. We loved it in 2017. I feel like I'm going over a minute, but oh, I get to, right. In 2017, we did have what they called a balance of power in a minority government situation. That was a sweet spot. We were really productive as a government, and we hope to return to that again. Thanks.
Well, I've had some significant experience in the last few years drawing people together and trying to get accountability on different levels. I currently am leading about 800 nurses in trying to get some legal representation for abuse that occurred during things that happened in our medical system. In the last couple of years, I've been working across the region in the regional district with a loose network called the Kootenay Tribe. And we have created a communication network. We are paying attention to things that are happening when it comes to bylaws and impacts of decisions. And we are increasing our participation in the budget meetings that happened this year. Historically, nobody ever goes to those because who wants to hear about numbers? This year, we had hundreds of people show up at budget meetings because we took the time to educate them on what was going on with the money. We did our best to explain things clearly, and we gave them an opportunity to participate with their directors and bring their concerns to the table. Now, what we're really having, though, is still a blockage from our governments listening to us. I want to redefine what public servant means. My role is to actually listen and to activate and to make sure that there is action followed by the talking. I am not a talker. I am an action person. So being that that is my character, I can guarantee that you're going to see results from how I produce opportunities for you to engage and the kinds of discussions that are going to happen, which are going to be focused on solving our problems. We're not going to be deferring always to somebody in Victoria to make the decisions for us. We need to take that power back for ourselves, and we need to participate in those decisions that are impacting us.
There definitely has been polarization. I think it's very clear when you look online. I've tried to build communities here when we've had tried to work with diverse voices here when we've had really challenging discussions, say around the inhalation site, and challenges that neighbors were facing, I brought community leaders together, so Interior Health, the police, members from Anchors, neighbors. There was, I think, around 30 of us in 2 separate meetings. One was with the Attorney General and Minister Mike Farnworth, and the other was with the Minister of Mental Health and Addiction, and looking at how we can all work together. On a broader basis, I am on the board of the Pacific Northwest Economic Region. So I work with people that support Trump, and we have to come to consensus, which is a very fascinating process. It is 5 jurisdictions in Canada and the US, and we focus on where we can collaborate. So areas like that would be invasive species, for example. What I find interesting about the Green Party's stance on wanting to hold the balance of power is, Sonia Furstenau, the leader of the Greens, that means that she is potentially interested in supporting John Rustad. I have sat with John Rustad in the legislature, and he is unhinged. He does not believe in climate science. He wants to rip up the Declaration of Indigenous Peoples Act, which will send us back to the courts. It will create uncertainty for First Nations, for communities, and for investors. And so when you want to hold the balance of power, that means that you are toying with the idea of supporting a John Rustad conservative government. I can do more work as a BC NDP MLA, and every seat is going to be critically important in this election. Thank you.
Okay. We're going to keep going with questions, and then we're going to come to rebuttals.
Okay. Our provincial school curriculum has an emphasis on climate change. There is next to no provincial curriculum on climate action. What will you do to support the Ministry of Education and Childcare to empower our students with climate action curriculum?
Okay, Corinne, Brittny, Nicole.
I'm just going to go straight to the root of the issue here. I think, kind of dropping in climate action as a indicator of the health of our education system is not a just way of looking at things. My position on education and funding should be that full funding should follow the child. Currently, right now, public sector gets a certain amount, and if you're an independent or an alternative school, you only get a third to half. What we are having now is, I spoke with a teacher from Surrey just before the school session started, and she was beside herself. She was the union steward, and she had just been dealing with 75 teachers telling her that they weren't coming back to work. We have created a public school system that is struggling. And so what we need to do now is to allow some healthy competition to be introduced into our education system. So full funding followed the child. The families would have control over which places they want their kids to go to have education. The teachers would have more control over what education systems they would want to participate in, because there wouldn't be a financial penalty for not working for the public system. And it should be the parents who are involved in the choices that determine what is a priority for the children and what the education systems determine is the best way to produce responsible, mature adults. So we have a systemic issue that by pointing out climate action is not actually addressing the real issue, which is we have a failure in this institution of being able to support good education for our kids.
Who's number 2? Brittny. Yeah,
so I absolutely love the idea of promoting climate action in schools. When I was a staff member with the Regional District of Central Kootenay and their Environmental Services Department, I got to go with Monica Neeson for their Beyond Recycling program. And that was a program that would go into the schools and teach students about their waste system, talking about separating materials, which materials to use. And at the end, we got to bring them to the Udashenya landfill on a bus tour. And it was always really fascinating for the students to get to see sort of the entire process of waste. Now that was probably about a decade or more ago, and so I think the curriculum and the focus would have likely, should shift, but I think making sure that young people understand climate action, understand what governments, what their responsibility is, and that what they can also do as young people, as students. I'm hoping that with the Youth Climate Corps, that there is going to be a lot of young people that are interested in taking direct climate action across the province, as older siblings and their friends enter into that program and have the empowerment of protecting their communities against wildfire, like fire smarting around the Caslow Town Hall. There was a home in Nelson that they retrofitted. It's for adults with diverse abilities, owned by a local nonprofit. They partnered with companies like Fortis and companies that were helping them teach them how to install things like insulation. They are learning how to use chainsaws and how to create food for us. And so these are all skills that they are learning while they're being paid a living wage. And then those young people go on into jobs like the BC Wildfire Service. So I am absolutely committed to inspiring climate action for young people. Thank you.
I love working with kids and watching them use their creativity and their ingenuity. They're very inspiring. I did a lot of homeschooling with my kids over the years. We were self-employed and had the capacity to do that. And I will never forget the solar oven one of my kids built. It was pretty impressive, and they won an award nationally and all that kind of thing. So there are actions that kids can take, and they're looking for it. We know that children and youth in this riding are experiencing high levels of climate anxiety. And so mental health support is also a part of climate action, learning to take care of ourselves, learning to feel in our bodies what's going on, and finding ways to channel that fear, channel that anxiety into something proactive and hopeful. And children very much have that capacity, and I would do everything in my power to encourage that. I'm not interested in micromanaging schools. I think our teachers are amazing. I think there's lots of opportunities when it comes to climate action, and I'm really curious to ask the question as MLA and to visit all the schools and encourage them to do that. So climate action for children looks like food, growing food, taking a bike to school instead of even a bus, or getting a drive from your parents, right? We cut our kids off from getting rides so that they had to bike to school. That's climate action. Good job, kids. So finding ways to not even talk about climate and really just how can you live your life more affordably, maybe a little more simply. And if you've got some great ideas, we hope our education system can support you to find those out in the world. Thank you.
You've got more? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
We got good? Okay, do you support the province-wide call to have big oil pay their fair share of mitigation costs?
Not order.
Standing. Can you repeat the question?
I can.
Judith?
Do you support the province-wide call to have big oil pay their fair share of mitigation costs?
Yes, absolutely, and that is something that we're doing when we formed government. Basically, corporations could walk away. So they could walk away from mine sites, they could walk away from deep oil wells, and it was on the taxpayer to have to clean that up. Right now, we've been increasing the amount of money that we're requiring large corporations to pay us in advance to make sure that the burden is not on the taxpayer. We're at about 40%, and we're going to be close to 90% here very soon, and then approaching 100%. It is critically important that we are not subsidizing the environmental mistakes of industry, particularly when we walk away. And there's been incredible leadership. And I just want to thank the young people who are heading out, and thank you so much for coming. It was lovely to see you. But yes, we are very committed to making sure that industry and the largest producer are. Okay, thank you.
Yes, of course, we want them to pay if it costs us to clean up after them. But why is it that they're even allowed to do that in the first place? So I would like to see that we start to focus on a shift in and address the root of the problem, which is their extraction. We don't want to wait for them to extract, do the damage, and then maybe give us some cash. Cash does not replace water. Cash does not replace healthy food. It doesn't replace really jobs. I mean, there's lots of things that we're losing with oil and gas, and making them pay their fair share is fine, but let's actually correct the problem and not let them do it in the first place.
I actually think everybody should be responsible for their own actions. And I don't know if you've noticed, but all through legislature, every time there's an act that is enacted, civil servants and public officials are given immunity from any decisions that they make or any impact that they have on us. Why is that becoming such a widespread issue? Why don't we have the ability to hold our public officials accountable? So there is responsibility that has to be enacted in all points. I'd even love to see, do you know when you walk down the grocery store and you look at all the boxes of crackers and I don't know, packages of this and that? I actually think that there should be fines imposed on any manufacturer who makes packaging larger than what the product is that they actually sell. We should be fining those guys. They're the ones who are creating all the garbage. They're the ones who are creating the increased transportation costs to bring in twice as much product. And all we need to do is hold those guys accountable in terms of make the packaging what the size of the product is, and then leave bins outside the stores, and then you put all your garbage in there, and then they can take care of it. Why are we bearing the consequence of other people's bad decisions? We also need to look at this whole recycling program. This needs a massive overview. I have been asking the regional district for a review of the service that is provided, because it appears that many of the things that we think we are recycling are actually not getting recycled. So how much of that are we being misinformed about? And nobody will actually conduct a review or give information on what's really going on with these programs. We need somebody who is willing to get in there, dig around, find out what's really happening, where our money is really going, and if the things that we're doing are actually productive or not. So that's what I'm good at.
We have time.
Okay, so that's it. Okay, on the topic of fracking, where do you stand on fracking, specifically the large amount of water that is used and contaminated as our province faces more droughts?
And the order, Becky?
Nicole, Brittny.
Fracking is one of the worst things we could continue to do in our province. It is impacting water. Sorry to see all of you go. Thanks for coming. We do not respect water in this province in the way that we should. We have laws in place that can protect water, but we're not using them. We are giving water away at $2.50 for 100 million liters to industry when we have to pay more for our water as residents. It's a tragedy, and I would like to remind everybody that the BC NDP government has helped facilitate it and has helped invest. They're investing in fracking. Fracking is ruining our water, and they're taking 90% of that gas out of the province anyway, so out goes our money, out goes our resources, and we're left with what? Water that's no longer usable. It affects our farming, it affects our drinking water, and it has to stop.
I'm not knowledgeable on fracking, and so I'm not going to give an opinion on it. I prefer to actually be able to speak with knowledge. However, I will give you a solution that is locally based. I was just up in Sandon. Has anybody been and seen the electricity generating station up there? It's amazing. They use gravity. They take a couple of streams, they divert it into a pipe, it's dropped 600 feet, the force goes through a turbine, creates electricity, goes out into another stream. There's no harm to the environment, there's no damage, it's just simple and effective. They can power 450 homes with that. However, because of provincial regulations and trying to shut down small generating stations, they are on the brink of being pressured to close down. When their potential is they could produce 10 times the electricity and could power 4,500 homes on that one system. We are full of places that have the elevation and the water that we could create energy that is clean, it's effective, it's compact, there's no environmental damage, and yet the big powers in this province are trying to shut it down. This is what we have for solutions in this region. This is what we have for solutions in this region. We have expertise, we have intelligence, we have the resources. We could be producing the best example of how a society could live and benefit everyone at way less cost. But somehow we keep missing it. So, that's my job. I'm going to get that generating station going to its full potential, and I'm going to make sure that we have these systems all over so that we don't have to be relying on things that do harm the environment. It's possible.
As government, you inherit all of the decisions of previous governments. So in Canada, that includes colonialism. It includes various forestry practices. It includes permits to allow things like fracking to happen. And as government, you're not able to just pull those permits without a massive risk of litigation. And so, unfortunately, we do not live in a utopia. We are focused on an energy transition. We have a call to power out right now, and it is all focused on renewable energy sources. So small hydro systems, we're not looking at something like another Site C. We would have never started that in the first place. Again, something we inherited. But smaller dams, we're also looking at solar and wind. There's tidal potential there. And so we're going to also be doing this call to power every 2 years. Someone had commented, I think, on social media, even though you're not supposed to read the comments, that I didn't know what I was talking about, and we should be looking at even smaller sources of electrical production. Because we're going to be doing this call to power every 2 years, we're going to be able to learn from what we did every 2 years and make the system better. We're also, we have the opportunity where homes and apartment buildings and schools and nonprofits, they are all able to put things like solar onto their properties and then feed into our electrical grid, where those owners can actually produce power and make money for themselves while providing energy for their community members and for their neighbors and for the province. We have an integrated grid. Our goal is that we are a net exporter of power rather than a net importer of power. And we are going to be doubling our power production specifically on clean, renewable energy by 2050. So that's a massive feat ahead of us, but that is going to be a lot of clean, renewable electricity that we are going to be producing, which is going to provide us a competitive advantage when investors are looking at places where they want to invest that has clean, renewable power. Thank you.
The topic of glyphosate. Glyphosate is a chemical that is used in our forests. It degrades the soil and is harmful to all life. What are your thoughts and plans around the use of glyphosate in our forests?
Corinne, Brittny, Nicole.
I actually got a phone call today from a woman in Argenta who we had a conversation about this today. And I just happened to bring a little fact sheet on it because of this. Her concerns were at the north end of Argenta, all the sprays that are happening to insecticides for mosquitoes and the glyphosate that is going on in the forests. How is this affecting water? Because a lot of watersheds are using surface water, and how do these sprays impact the water that people are using in their systems? Now, it's interesting because, on one hand, you're going to have the regulatory agencies in the USA, Canada, Japan, Australia, and European Union who say that they looked at the cancer rates in humans and studies with laboratories who were fed high doses of glyphosate. And based on these studies, they determined that glyphosate is not likely to be carcinogenic. However, a committee of scientists working for the International Agency for Research on Cancer of the WHO evaluated fewer studies and reported that it is probably carcinogenic. Do you think that the government should be risking your health? This spraying that's going on is not only affecting water supplies, it is also making our forests highly flammable. But what we are not getting at is the actual ingredient list of these sprays, how toxic they are, who's managing these sprays. And there's been multiple efforts through Freedom of Information to get this data to find out if we really are being put at risk. It's just not transparent. So, again, I'll take care of that.
Thank you. Thank you for that fantastic preamble. Just one correction. We do know what is in glyphosate. It's required by an MSDS sheet, I believe it's called, and so we do know the ingredients. However, I do agree with you about the potential risks of glyphosates. When I was in India, I lived on Vandana Shiva's seed-saving farm at the Earth University. I did, Bonnie Baker. Don't you love Vandana Shiva? Ask Bonnie later who Vandana Shiva is. She is a quantum physicist who has been working for decades to fight against Monsanto, who is the producer of Roundup, which is glyphosate. And so she is the global leader in fighting against Monsanto and glyphosate. I got to meet her on several occasions, live on her farm, meet her sister Mira and her brother Kuldeep, and meet with the farmers across the entire region. And it's been something that I've been concerned about for a really long time. And I was absolutely thrilled when I read our platform today and to see that the efforts that we have made to say we don't want, as a BC-NDP government, to be allowing the spraying of glyphosates. We are committed to phasing it out. It is in our platform, and I am so grateful that you addressed all the risks. So thank you very much, Corey.
BC Greens, of course, don't want sprays in our forests. There is a whole series of interventions we've had in our forests that have created the overmanaged situation that we have now, creating really highly flammable forests. And what glyphosate, as you've shared with us all, it kills the deciduous trees. And so deciduous trees hold more water. They keep our forests more moist. They protect the surrounding ecosystem, and the fact that we're killing them and creating an inflamed situation is very frustrating. It's really, I'm shocked again that this is still even possible in our province.
We've got a couple of more questions from the audience that are focused on in the environment topics, and then we'll just see where we're at timing-wise.
Would you support ecological, environmental regulations on privately owned forest land, especially with regard to logging?
So that's when I was on Nelson City Council. Jesse, Rick, Keith. That was something that we were all met with immediately, as the lands around Cottonwood were slated to be logged. And we fought to make sure that the area around Cottonwood would be protected with the purchase of that land and turning it into a park. And that was really when I started to understand the risks around allowing private landowners to log. Of course, there are some regulations. You have to be careful that you're not working in a stream, that you're not impacting waterways. However, as we can see all around us, the consequences can be quite devastating. And I remember we were looking at the UBCM resolution. So the UBCM is the Union of British Columbian Municipalities. And there had been a call to address private land logging going back almost every single year since the 80s. It is something that we have talked about in Rural Caucus. It's something that I've talked with my colleagues about. It's something that I spoke with Minister Conroy about when she was the Minister of Forests. And people get very concerned when they're worried that you're going to impact what they're allowed to do on their private property. So it is something that I think absolutely needs to be addressed. Have we committed to addressing it in this platform? We got it today. I've looked through it. I haven't actually seen that yet, but that is something that I would work with my rural colleagues, because it impacts us the most, to see how we could find a balance where, if you have a tree on your property that's posing a risk to your home and you're trying to fire smart, that of course you're able to cut that tree down without a bunch of government regulation and red tape. But are you able to clear cut the side of a mountain? I think we need more controls than that. And so that is something that, as your MLA, in government, in caucus, that I will be able to work with my colleagues, the minister, and the premier to address. Thank you.
I'm actually quite tired of us talking about private land as separate from public land, and that we can have different expectations. BC Greens committed in our platform to amend the Private Managed Forest Land Act to address this very specifically. We cannot assume that something we do on our private land isn't going to impact other properties. That ability to just draw a line around nature and control it and think that we can do what we like, those times are on their way out. We have watched a lot of clear-cut logging on private land in this region. I remember cross-country skiing last winter and listening to the feller bunchers working really hard to just rip the trees off of private land. And it was heartbreaking. It was tough. We're out enjoying nature, and now there's all this clear cut. I see people in the room who worked really hard to save Cottonwood Lake. We had to buy out people who just come in, clear, and get the heck out, and we're left with the devastation. It needs to stop.
That's why I really like my model of your ecologist, your fire service, your forest service, and your lumber sector all working as a team locally. Let's face it, politicians who are making decisions for us in Victoria for things that happen in rural BC is not working. We're getting strangled, we're being managed by bad decisions, and we're not getting a very good outcome for what we are trying to protect and sustain. As a nurse, I had to practice to standards that were set for my profession. It didn't matter whether I worked for the public sector or for a private company. I still had to adhere to a professional standard. It should be that way all across the board when it comes to forest management. We need the team. We need the team of the ecologist, the fire service, the forest service, and the lumber and timber sector to all come in, look at something that is, it can't be just 5 acres. We have a minimum amount, so if you're looking at 20 acres or whatever we need to come up with, there needs to be a plan in place before it started. What are we taking out? What are we putting back? What needs to be done in this piece of land to actually produce the best kind of forest that we need for this region? That plan needs to be made before a single tree is cut. We need to use our local expertise to develop this, and we are the only ones that are going to come up with a good plan because we've had decades already knowing that we're not getting it. So it's time for us to be the solution.
So we have one last question from the audience that is the focus of this, and then I'll check about rebuttals. So think about if you want to use a rebuttal for anything you've heard in this section, and then we'll finish with the closing statements from the candidates, and we'll be done.
The NDP has abandoned its promise to enact endangered species legislation, and it is not following the Federal Species at Risk Act. Example, federally listed whitebark pine are being logged in the Kootenays. If elected, what will you do to protect endangered species like caribou and whitebark pine?
Species are declining really fast now. We are losing them on a daily basis. There is legislation in place that, again, we could be using, and we're choosing not to. The government has been working on a biodiversity and ecosystem health framework, and I want to encourage you to consider voting green because we don't want another framework when we have species disappearing on the daily. We don't want another framework that might finally ensure that we're protecting biodiversity and ecosystem health. We don't want to put that framework on the shelf. We want to make sure that gets legislated in this province. Thank you.
We were at a meeting last night at the Nelson Rod and Gun Club, and the BC Wildlife Federation gave a presentation. They have for decades been bringing their concerns to the province about the numbers of wildlife that are going down, the reforestation issues, and they told us consistently they are being ignored by government. They have significant concerns over what is happening on our public lands, the lack of access that is starting to creep in, and that there is no taking the information that they have for data as what is being used for the decisions that need to be incorporated into how we're managing this. They are extremely frustrated. They are knowledgeable, they know what they're doing. What they don't have is funding. We need to start directing our resources to the things that matter. And I noticed that we're giving a lot of money to events and fairs, and yet the people who are managing one of the biggest resources in our province are getting nothing. This needs to change. We do not have unlimited finances. We need to start being more disciplined and responsible with the resources that we have. We need to quit wasting it. It is not something that is just an ATM machine. We are $100 billion in debt. We I don't even know if we can make the interest payments on what we are in debt for, never mind carrying the services that we need to provide in a better way right now. The next 10 years is going to require a disciplined, managed, responsible approach to ensure that the things that are important to us are being protected. And that's not happening right now. Historically, it's not happening. Decades of neglect. So how do we catch up on this? Well, we need to start putting people in power who will actually make sure that this is activated. And we've had lots of history to see what's really happening with our government and what's not.
Thank you. So in this democratic process, we get to hear from a variety of voices, and I appreciate that process. Unfortunately, many of the things that you claim are factually inaccurate, Corey. So I will just state that. In terms of the funding that the BC Wildlife Federation is getting, we have put $100 million, we've set that aside as a fund that people are able to access every single year. The BC Wildlife Federation is accessing it every year, and it's to support conservation, to do things like creating new wetlands or repairing wetlands. And that is $100 million that Finn Donnelly was first spearheading, who was my seatmate, and I was supporting him in those efforts. And I am really proud that we are starting to change that trend line and investing in biodiversity and an ecosystem framework. I was just recently speaking with Rachel Holt and Suzanne Simard, and we were talking about forestry, and they really want to see the biodiversity and ecosystem health, the ecosystem health framework enacted in government. And as an MLA, I will make sure that that happens. I think that it is critically important that we focus on making sure that we are not losing our biodiversity. My dad, he has worked in the caribou pens, the maternity pens, and we don't want to lose these iconic species. It is critically important. I think that those are values that all of us share in that room. And as an MLA in government, that is the best choice we have to have a strong voice to fight at places like in our caucus room, at Treasury Board, where I have sat for the last 2 years, to increase funding for things like habitat protection, wildlife, ecosystems, and things that really matter to our rural residents, and that is what I commit to you. So thank you.
Do you have a point? Yes. Okay. Great. Thank you. Rebuttals. Does anybody want to use a rebuttal card from anything you've heard during this last section? Okay. Nicole, 1 minute. Right there. Push it up.
I'd like to address the idea that Greens don't have much power in the legislature. We had 2 Green MLAs there in this past term, and if you look into the official record of their efforts in the legislature, you get pages of what we call interventions. If we look to the record of our MLA over the past term, that is just 1 screen long. So to say that Greens do not have power, to say that we do not have access to look after our constituents in an independent way without oversight and whipping, as we call it, from a party, well, you're wrong. I think we do have a lot of power. We've exercised it. We have experience with that power. And I would also like to talk about, since I have the time apparently, the idea that, well, don't vote for Greens because they might work with the Conservatives. That's the whole point of being Green, not to get in there and work with Conservatives, but to remove the party and work across party lines and look for the good ideas and create long-term plans together. And if we include everybody, we're more likely to get down that path. But if we start excluding each other and saying your priorities and what you're concerned about doesn't matter, then we are further polarizing ourselves, and then I don't know what we're going to do.
Well, any other rebuttals? Yes?
So I apologize if what I said made it sound like as an MLA you don't have power. Any MLA that gets to sit in the BC legislature has power. There have only been just over 1,000 people elected to the BC legislature in history. It is a tremendous responsibility to be an MLA, whether you are in the governing party, in the opposition, or as an independent, which I think has only happened once. That was a person was reelected. Of course, there is an independent that is sitting there now. We did work across party lines. I've sat in several committees. I have a lot of respect for, in particular, your colleague Adam Olsen. I sat right behind him and Sonia. We would talk pretty much on a daily basis. What my concern is that as you're hoping to hold on to the balance of power. That means that you're hoping that the Conservatives get a lot of votes in this province and hold a lot of seats. That is not a risk that we can afford at all. We cannot afford to have a government with a leader who does not believe in climate change, who does not uphold human rights. The comments that he is allowing his candidates to make, and also Bruce Banman, when he was sitting in the legislature on the day of the Doukhobor apology, David Eby spoke, the opposition spoke, and the Greens spoke. When it was the turn of Banman to speak and apologize to the survivors of the Doukhobor children that were taken away, instead he used that opportunity to talk about anti-SOGI, which was totally disrespectful. He had 10 minutes later, it was question period, and he could ask anything and address anything that he wanted. Thank you. We cannot give them that opportunity.
Okay.
Did you know that the going rate of being taken from your family, taken to a residential school, put behind a fence where you can see your family once every 2 weeks for an hour and you're not allowed to touch, and then you go through 60 years of trauma and waiting for the government to actually deal with the harm that it did, the going rate is $18,000 compensation. That is what this government provided. If you think that that is a just system, let me tell you about human rights. I have people who have been waiting 3 years to get through the Human Rights Tribunal and are still not being heard through our legal system. Our legal system is not working. It is not enforcing the law. And what happens to a society when the law is not enforced? The government is not held accountable. There is no correction that is instituted to protect the people. And for all of this talk, what we have seen with our own eyes is a deterioration of every single institution that has been created in this province. Our healthcare is failing, our education system is failing, our legal system is failing, our forests are failing, and we can keep pretending that playing musical chairs with political parties is going to save us, or we can start choosing people who are going to be effective leaders that are going to fight for you because it's you that's important, not the political party, and will pay the price for that. And I have.
Nicole, did you have another rebuttal? Or
The BC NDP are trying to paint themselves as being the opposite and the party that's standing up for climate, but we have experienced differently. We are not feeling the impacts of the promised forestry reforms. We are not feeling the impacts of protected water. We are still being told that we might be able to save Weimar, save the water in Weimar. We might be able to save the old growth. There's not much difference between the NDP and the Conservatives, and so we're not hoping for a balance of power. We're actually asking you to have some courage and stand with us so that we can bring a balance of responsibility into the legislature. I agree with Corinne. We've let government sidle up to international industry and send our resources out one after the other, and we're not seeing the benefits locally. We do need to turn our attention to local needs, and I frankly resent that you think that our strategy is so simplistic in hoping for something. We have a strategy, and regardless of how that legislature looks after this election, Greens need to be there, and we need to have influence.
Any other rebuttals? I think you're the only one who has one left, Brittny. Corinne used two. No, yeah.
So something else that I want to address is the idea of the whipped vote. And so it is true, we do have a government whip. His name is Gary Beggs. He is a very lovely man. And most of the time, what his role is to try to make sure that there's enough of us attending certain events and that he's organizing caucus. There has not been a single vote that I have had to do in 4 years where I have felt that I did not want to vote with my party. There has been, I had a colleague that there was a certain vote that he didn't want to vote with the party. It was a hyper-local issue for him. He went and talked to the whip, and the whip agreed. You don't have to vote with us. And so he chose to not be in there for the vote. The idea that we do not have independence as MLAs in the BC NDP is frankly a false narrative. I have the opportunity as a BC NDP MLA to have my voice heard by my colleagues on a regular basis. We meet 6 times a week in Victoria to discuss a variety of topics. And sometimes we get to the end of the meeting and we have to go back to the same topic because there's so many of us that have a variety of opinions on that topic. And now these people are not just my colleagues, but they have become also my very close friends. Often when we are finished in the legislature, after a very long day, we still need to eat something, so we choose to go out for a meal together. I have spent countless hours carpooling with Minister Kat Conroy and Rolly Russell, where we're talking about a variety of different issues. You have a different level of access when you're an MLA within government. There's opportunities for cabinet. There's opportunities for Treasury Board. There's opportunities on the legislative review. You have different portfolios, and you're able to make more change in government than you can ever have in opposition. So thank you.
All right. No, you used to. Okay. Yep, one more.
Okay. I am not here because I'm looking for a position in Victoria. I don't want to climb the ladder. I want to solve problems here. In order to do that, I have to disrupt the status quo because there is a whole group of people that are benefiting from how this system works, and it's not us. If you haven't noticed, rural BC is getting strangled. If you want somebody to come in and stir up the protection that you need, they have to be somebody that can take it. They have to be willing to engage in a way that can cause people to not be happy. But if the motivation is that I am here because you need representation The only way that can be done is as an independent, because political parties, whether you want to admit it or not, are all compromised. They just shift seats, and one time they're with one party and another they're with the other, and they're protecting their position as a political party. My role is to protect you. I can do that by going, you know what? I like the Green Party environment ideas. I'm going to take that. But I don't have to agree with the Green Party ideas of increasing safe supply. I can look at did you know the Conservative candidate couldn't come tonight because his party said he couldn't? Well, how does that leave you if your potential MLA is controlled enough by the party that they can't even come and talk to you? That is how our system is working right now.
Okay. So we have the final section here. We will hear from each candidate for 1 minute with some closing comments. And what's our order, Becky?
Brittny, Nicole.
Okay, I come to this with some practical experience. I am a healthcare provider. I have worked in rural BC and First Nations communities providing healthcare. I was actually on the healthcare reform policy team for John Rustad's Conservative Party. We created this whole reform for him, and then within a month of him providing this to the public, he removed all the candidates except one off of his team. Currently, I would be the one person on this whole legislation that would actually know something about healthcare in rural BC and how to solve these problems. I have firsthand experience with building and construction. I know how we can do housing that's affordable, that is, we need to reduce all the bureaucracy around this. There are solutions for that. I also come from a small business background, so I am not looking to the government to fund everything. It's about how do we generate economic activity and independence for ourselves. We have to turn our thinking away from being dependent on the government into being independent. If you want to be independent, you're going to have to choose someone that is independent to lead you. And that's who I am, Corinne Mori.
Do I get 1 minute or two?
One.
One, okay. I'm going to read because it's hard to do anything in a minute. I'm Brittny Anderson, and I'm running for re-election with the BC NDP because I love this community. I grew up here, and I want to fight for you. As the BC NDP, we have built housing for people. I can look at Jenny Robinson. She has delivered, because of partnerships with the provincial government, housing for seniors, housing for people with low incomes, and we have announced more housing projects, not just in Nelson, not just in this region, but across the province. We have lowered childcare costs, and we know that childcare and housing are at the crux of the solutions for affordability, and childcare actually is such a huge benefit to our economy and getting people, but particularly women, back to work. I have a Master's of Environmental Science and Policy. I am deeply committed to climate action. I will work with the BC NDP, MLAs, and across party lines to get climate action for this province, to continue to accelerate that and to support people here in our region and to ensure that their voice is heard within government. I want to thank all of you for coming here tonight. I want to thank you for your very thoughtful questions. It is such an honor to have been able to serve for the past 4 years, and I really hope on or before October 19th, you will vote for me and support me again so I can continue to take action on your behalf. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the organizers and for all of you for sticking it out to the end. Thank you so much. I hope you've learned tonight the importance of good listening. We weren't always answering your questions. I noticed this is an environmental and climate forum, and I would like you to think again on a new strategy for voting. If you are concerned about climate, I believe I am your only choice. We are still spending billions in oil and gas, and we're not investing enough in our communities. BC Greens are a local economy focus. Everything that we do looks at is looked through a lens of climate action, of care in our communities, in looking for work for people who live here, looking for homes for people who live here. We have been sending way too many of our resources, too much of our money out of this province, and we need to reclaim our power. I think we can relate in that way, Corinne. So thank you for coming. Please consider voting green. It's a big step for some of you, but you know what? If we all have a little bit more courage together, we can band together and break the status quo in this province.
Well, that concludes this forum. Thank you to our three candidates. And thanks to you for attending. Thank you to Nelson United Church for this space, and to the organizing committee for the efforts they've put in place. And for voting information for Kootenay Central about advanced polls and hours and location for polls, go to Election BC website, elections.bc.ca. And there is candidate literature available as you leave, so go out the doors and take a look and see what's there. Thank you very much.